This podcast includes content created using artificial intelligence tools. All information is for general purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, legal, or regulatory advice. Listeners should verify information independently and consult qualified professionals for personalized guidance. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Before we continue, I'd like to mention that the Luxembourg Fundcast is created and produced by Bertrand Mériot, a practicing regulatory lawyer admitted to the Luxembourg and Paris bars. The mission of this podcast is to bring clear, free, and reliable information sourced from official references that are carefully curated and continually updated and refined through high-standard, evolving prompt engineering on Luxembourg's financial regulation and investment funds to professionals and anyone interested in the Luxembourg Financial Center. Okay, so today we're diving into a topic that's, really fundamental for market integrity. We're talking about the market abuse regulation, or MAR, and specifically that crucial DUI, sometimes maybe a bit overlooked, of managing the insider list for listed companies.
Our goal today, and just to be clear, all our analysis is based on what we know as of today, August 29th, 2025, is to really unpack the key insights from the sources you've gathered. We want to give you a clear path to understanding this properly. Because let's face it, this isn't just about ticking a box on a compliance checklist, is it? It's about protecting investors, ensuring market fairness, and honestly safeguarding a company's whole reputation.
Absolutely. When you really dig into the insider list requirement, it becomes clear pretty quickly it's much more than just an administrative task. It's I like the phrase the gatekeeper's ledger. It really captures its role as a cornerstone of good corporate governance. And this is especially true, I think, for companies dealing with complex situations. Maybe they're dual listed, say, Luxembourg Stock Exchange and Euronext Paris, or perhaps they're navigating the information whirlwind that often follows a big acquisition. So our aim today is to go beyond just reciting the legal text. We want to get into the practical realities of actually mastering this function, seeing how it can be less of a headache and more of a strategic advantage.
I really like that framing, gatekeeper's ledger. Yeah, it paints a picture of needing real vigilance, real control, which is exactly right for this area. So just to start us off, let's get a really clear handle on what an insider list is and why it's, so fundamental. Hashtag executive summary and key takeaways.
Right. So at its heart, the insider list comes from Article 18 of the MR. It's essentially a definitive, constantly updated record. Think of it like a diary, but a very precise one. It has to track every single person, internal or external, who gets access to sensitive information that could move the company's share price. And crucially, it needs the exact time they got that access. For the company secretary, managing this isn't just another job. It's a foundational duty. It's the first line of defense against illegal disclosure of that inside information. And here's something really critical. If the regulators ever come knocking, this list isn't just one document they look at. It's usually the main thing they scrutinize. It's your undeniable audit trail.
Undeniable audit trail. That's a strong way to put it. Yeah, it definitely shifts the focus from it being a chore to being a mission-critical document. As we get deeper into this, what are the, three big ideas, the main takeaways you really want people to remember from our conversation today?
Okay, good question. As we go through the details, I think there are three core concepts to really hold on to. These are the key points. First, think of the insider list as a strategic instrument. This is really about challenging the old view. It is not just a compliance tick box. It's a dynamic risk management tool. How well it's managed, especially, say, after a merger when things are chaotic, actually says a lot about the company's governance culture. It shows how much control you have over sensitive information. A really well-kept list signals maturity, discipline, and a real commitment to playing fair in the market.
That's a really important shift in thinking. But I can almost hear some company secretaries thinking, strategic instrument. It still feels like a huge compliance burden, especially when we're stretched thin after a big deal. How do you actually bridge that gap? Turn the perception into reality for teams on the ground.
That's a fair challenge, and it's a common feeling. I think the bridge involves using the right tools, maybe automation, which we can touch on later. But fundamentally, it's about recognizing that the cost of getting it wrong, regulatory fines, reputation damage, shareholder lawsuits that cost is way higher than the perceived burden of doing it right. When you frame it as protecting the company's ability to even do future deals without leaks, then the burden starts looking more like a necessary investment. It's like building a proper corporate fortress, not just putting up a flimsy fence.
Corporate fortress, I like that.
Yeah.
And that probably leads right into your second core concept.
Exactly. The second point is process integrity is paramount. Look, The legal and regulatory value of your insider list isn't just about the final document itself. It's fundamentally about the integrity of the process used to create and maintain it. This means you need relentless precision. Updates have to be contemporaneous, right when things happen, with accurate timestamps. Your data handling needs to be secure, obviously respecting GDPR. And you need solid, documented procedures for how you deal with all your external advisors. Without that documented integrity, the list just doesn't carry the same weight with regulators because they can't really trust where it came from or how it was put together.
That makes total sense. It's not just what you produce, but how you produced it.
Yeah.
And the final takeaway.
The third one, and this is really timely, is the regulatory landscape is evolving. The rules around market abuse aren't set in stone. It's a living framework, constantly being updated. A strategic company secretary needs to be looking ahead, anticipating changes. We'll talk about the EU Listing Act amendments, for example, which are expected around June 2026. And there are specific Luxembourg things like the CSSF requirements and their IRIS portal. Being proactive about adapting isn't just nice to have, it's really the mark of effective governance. It shows the organization is mature and forward-looking.
Okay, those 3 points, strategic instrument, process integrity, and evolving landscape, really lay a strong foundation. With those in mind, let's start digging into the core obligation itself, Article 18 of ARA. # core obligation deconstructing Article 18 of MARA.
Right, so the legal requirement to have an insider list, this applies to any company whose shares or bonds are traded on a regulated market. And it comes straight from European law, Article 18 of Regulation EU number 596/2014. That's MAR. Now, because it's an EU regulation, it applies directly in all member states, including Luxembourg. You don't need a separate Luxembourg law to make Article 18 effective. But the picture is completed by national law. Here in Luxembourg, that's the law of 23 December 2016 on market abuse. This law does a couple of important things. It names the CSSF as the national watchdog, gives it its powers to investigate and supervise, and sets out the local penalties for breaking the rules. So you've got this combination. A harmonized EU rule backed up by strong local enforcement powers.
Okay, so EU law sets the rule, national law provides the teeth, essentially. But everything hangs on one key definition, right? What exactly is inside information? Because that seems to be the trigger for the whole obligation. If you don't have it, you don't need the list.
You've hit the nail on the head. That's the absolute crux. The entire insider list requirement kicks in only when inside information exists. No inside info, no list needed. So understanding that definition precisely is job number 1 for any company secretary. Article 7 of MAR gives us a very clear 4-part test. And the key word here is cumulative. All 4 conditions have to be met. If even one isn't, then it's not inside information.
All 4. Okay, so it's not just 1 or 2 ticking the box. That sounds like it needs careful judgment, probably legal input.
Definitely. Let's quickly run through them. First, the information must be of a precise nature. This means it has to relate to circumstances that exist or are reasonably expected to happen, or an event that's occurred or is reasonably expected. And crucially, it has to be specific enough that you could actually draw a conclusion about its likely effect on the price. So, for example, just a vague rumor about a potential merger probably doesn't cut it, or a general board chat about strategic options. But a board decision to formally start exclusive talks and kick off due diligence, or signing an NDA for those talks, that's much more likely to be precise. It's about specificity and potential impact, not just whispers.
Got it. Something concrete, identifiable, not just musings. What's next?
Second is simple. The information has not been made public. If it's out there already, maybe reported by Reuters or filed with the CSSF, then it's not inside anymore. The market already knows. Third, it has to relate directly or indirectly to one or more issuers or financial instruments. This just ties the information specifically to the companies or the shares bonds MAR is designed to protect. General economic news usually wouldn't fit here. And fourth, this is often the trickiest one. If the information were made public, it would be likely to have a significant effect on the prices of those instruments. This is the reasonable investor test. You have to ask, would a reasonable investor likely use this information as part of their decision to buy, sell, or hold? If the answer is yes, then it meets this test. It's about materiality, judged through the lens of how the market actually behaves.
That reasonable investor test really grounds it in reality.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned something called a protracted process. That sounds especially relevant for big, complex deals like M&A. How does that fit in?
Yes, the protracted process. This is a really important detail, particularly for M&A, and it's covered in Article 7, Paragraph 3 of MAR. An M&A deal, as you know, isn't just one big bang. It's a sequence of steps. Think about the typical flow. Initial approach, maybe an NDA, a non-binding offer. The board decides to proceed, then deep due diligence, tough negotiations, finally getting board approval. MA recognizes this. It clarifies that it's not just the final signing of the deal that counts as inside information. The intermediate steps along the way can also be inside information if they meet those same 4 cumulative tests we just went through. This creates a real challenge, you know. The company secretary has to constantly assess, has this latest step crossed the threshold? Is this now a distinct piece of inside information requiring an update to the list or maybe even a new list section? It demands almost constant vigilance.
Wow. Yeah, constant vigilance seems right, like checking every stage of construction, not just the final building.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the EU Listing Act is set to change things here.
Yes, this is a really significant development we need to watch closely. The EU Listing Act, which is all about making EU markets more competitive, tackles this protracted process issue head-on, specifically regarding public disclosure. The new rules, expected around June 2026, are set to introduce a major change. They'll basically exempt those intermediate steps in a long process from the need for immediate public disclosure. The idea is to stop forcing companies to announce every single minor development in a complex deal, which can sometimes be unhelpful, creating speculation or harming negotiations.
Okay, so that sounds like a potential relief for companies simplifying the disclosure side of things. But you flagged there's a crucial but here, something this change doesn't do.
Absolutely critical point. It's vital to grasp what this change doesn't mean, because this is where the insider list becomes even more important. While the amendment removes the obligation for immediate public disclosure of intermediate steps, it does not change the fact that the information itself is still inside information. So the rules against insider dealing under Article 8 and unlawful disclosure under Article 10, they still apply fully. The big consequence here is that the insider list becomes even more crucial. It's the primary tool to ensure that confidential information is tightly controlled internally. The focus shifts, you see. It shifts from managing immediate public announcements to managing rigorous, watertight internal secrecy, that gatekeeper's ledger role. It becomes paramount. It's a subtle shift, but a massive one in terms of risk management.
That's a huge point, almost counterintuitive. The info is still hot, still inside, but the pressure shifts to internal controls, making the list more critical than ever. So if the default is disclose ASP, how does a company decide it can delay? What's the process?
Okay, so the basic rule, Article 17, Paragraph 1, is crystal clear. Issuers must tell the public about inside information as soon as possible, transparency first. But Article 17, Paragraph 4, offers that vital escape hatch. An issuer can delay disclosure, but it's on their own responsibility and only if 3 conditions are all met. First, immediate disclosure would likely prejudice the issuer's legitimate interests. Think M&A negotiations yes-may guidelines, which the CSSF adopted via Circular 22-813, explicitly mention this. Announcing talks too early could kill the deal, right? Second, the delay must not be likely to mislead the public. This is a judgment call. You can't delay if the market is already trading based on wrong information that your silence would just reinforce. And third, and here we come full circle, the issuer must be able to ensure the confidentiality of the information. This is where the insider list is absolutely fundamental. How can you possibly claim you're ensuring confidentiality if you don't know exactly who knows the information and when they found out? The list is your proof. Without it, your justification for delaying disclosure just falls apart.
So the list is the absolute bedrock for proving that third condition. It's the evidence you have things under control. Now, who actually has the legal duty to create and maintain this list? Is it just an internal job?
The legal text, Article 18, says the obligation falls on the issuer or any person acting on their behalf or on their account. Oh, no. Internally, yes, it's almost always delegated to the company secretary and their team. It fits naturally with their role in governance and information flow. But think about any big deal. The circle of people with inside info explodes outwards. You've got law firms, investment banks, auditors, PR consultants. All these external parties become insiders too. They are seen as acting on behalf of the issuer. And importantly, they also have their own legal duty to maintain their own MAR-compliant insider lists for their staff working on the deal.
So the advisors have their own homework to do. Does that mean the company can just hand it off and, breathe easy?
Absolutely not. This is a really common misunderstanding and a potential pitfall. Article 18, Paragraph 2 is explicit. Even if you delegate the task to an advisor, the issuer remains fully responsible for compliance. So a strategic company secretary can't just assume advisors are doing it right. They need to actively check the best way. through the contract. You need specific clauses in the engagement letters with all external advisors. These clauses should spell out their MAR duties, require them to confirm they're compliant, and state they'll cooperate if the regulator asks questions. It's about embedding that responsibility contractually. It turns a potential risk into a managed one.
That makes complete sense. Proactive risk management, not just hoping for the best. Okay, we've got the legal framework, the who. Let's get into the real practicalities, the daily management. This is where I imagine the friction often happens. Hashtag practical mechanics, the daily management of an insider list.
Exactly. Now we move from the what and why to the how, the day-to-day management. The good news, perhaps, is that the technical side isn't really open to interpretation. There's a specific EU Regulation Commission implementing Regulation 2016-347 that lays it all out. It mandates an electronic format and provides very specific templates. And the key phrase is, these templates must be followed without deviation. No room for creativity here.
Without deviation.
Okay.
That's pretty clear. So let's break down these templates. What are the key parts, the data fields we absolutely need to capture? This sounds like where the real work happens and where those challenges might pop up.
Right. There are primarily 2 templates in the regulation. Getting familiar with them, clause by clause, is essential. First, you have template 1. The event-based insider list section. This is your main tool, the one you'll use most often. You have to create a new separate section following the template exactly for each distinct piece of inside information. So if you're working on that confidential deal, Project Orion, you create a section specifically called Insider List, section related to Project Orion. This keeps things organized and auditable.
Okay, so compartmentalized. Not one massive list, but separate sections for separate secrets. That makes sense.
Precisely. And within each section, for every single person who has access to that specific information, the data required is, well, pretty extensive. We're talking personal ID, first name, surname, crucially, their birth surname too, date of birth, and their national identification number if they have one, contact details. Now, this is often the tricky bit. You need their work phone numbers direct line, mobile, but the rules also require their personal phone numbers home and mobile, plus their full personal home address, professional details, company name and address, their job title or function, and importantly, the specific reason for being an insider. This can't be vague like legal advisor. It needs to be tied to the project, like lead external counsel for Project Orion or a member of IT integration team for Project Orion. Specificity is key for regulators. Timestamps. These are absolutely critical and non-negotiable. You need the exact date and time, in Coordinated Universal Time, UTC, when the person got access and when they stopped having access. These aren't just admin dates, they mark legally significant moments.
Wow. That is a lot of detail, especially the personal contact info and the UTC timestamps. I can definitely see challenges there. How do companies usually handle the likely pushback when asking senior execs or partners at law firms for their personal home address and mobile number? That sounds like navigating a minefield.
You've put your finger on probably the biggest practical hurdle. Imagine asking a board member or a senior partner at an advisory firm for their private mobile number and home address. Understandably, they might resist asking why it's needed, citing privacy concerns. Minefield is a good word for it. The key is really clear communication and explaining the legal necessity. You need to be able to say, politely but firmly, look, this isn't optional. It's a direct requirement under Article 18 of AR. Regulators need this to be able to contact people quickly in an investigation. You also need to reassure them about data security, that it's only used for MR compliance, not for anything else. It often requires backing from the legal team. But without collecting this data, your list simply isn't compliant, and that's a huge risk. And then there's the timestamp precision. It's not about when you added them to the list software. It's the exact moment they became aware of the information. Pinpointing that can be tough in fast-moving projects, especially with informal chats. It needs good internal record keeping. Who told who and when.
So template 1 is the workhorse, needing real diligence and careful people management. What about template 2? Is that used much?
No, template 2. The permanent insider section is very different. It's optional and should be used very, very sparingly. It's designed only for a tiny group of people who, because of their specific role, genuinely have access to all inside information in the company all the time. ESMA, the European regulator, has been very clear, use this with extreme caution. We're talking maybe the CEO, the CFO, perhaps the chief legal officer, the chair of the board. It's not for people who just handle a lot of sensitive stuff day to day. They should be on event-based lists. Its use is really narrow, mainly to avoid making regulatory oversight less precise.
That makes sense. A very small, very senior group, an exception, really. But what if someone on that permanent list also gets involved in Project Orion? Do they appear on both lists?
Great question. Yes, absolutely. Even if someone's on the permanent list, if they gain access to specific project-related inside info, they must also be added to the relevant event-based list section for that project. This ensures you have a complete granular record for that specific event. It ties them explicitly to that information from that point in time. It's much clearer for an audit trail.
Okay. Now, the big one we touched on, MER's hunger for personal data versus GDPR. How do companies, especially here in Luxembourg, square that circle? It really does feel like walking a tightrope.
It is a genuine operational friction point, and managing it properly is a key task for the company secretary and legal team. MA demands extensive personal data home addresses, private mobiles, which seems, on the face of it, to clash with GDPR's data minimization principle. And as you said, people will question it. The solution isn't to skip collecting the data that's a MAR breach, plain and simple. The solution is to build a really robust GDPR-compliant process around it. This means having a specific privacy notice just for insiders. It needs to clearly state the legal basis Article 18 MAR compliance, which is a valid legal obligation under GDPR. It needs to state the purpose, maintaining the list, responding to regulators.
So transparency and legal basis up front, not just a casual request.
Exactly. Then you need strict access controls. Who can see this sensitive data? Only those who absolutely need to for MAR compliance. Log everything, and be clear about the 5-year retention period required by MAR. Critically, you cannot just keep this stuff on random spreadsheets on shared drives. That's asking for trouble under both MAR and GDPR. You really need secure, dedicated systems, often specialist software, to manage these lists properly. They provide the security, audit trails, and controls that manual methods just can't match. It's moved beyond best practice. It's arguably a necessity now.
That's a very clear approach to handling that tension. It really highlights the need for careful legal input in setting up those processes. Okay, let's talk about the life cycle of an actual list section. How does it get created, updated, managed over time?
Right, the life cycle is quite defined. Creation. This happens the moment inside information is identified and the decision to delay disclosure is made. It has to be contemporaneous, done right then, ideally within hours, not days later playing catch-up. Updating. This is ongoing. Article 18 says updates must be promptly. Regulators like the CSSF take this to mean immediately, contemporaneously with the event, not saving them up for a weekly batch update. What triggers an update? 3 main things. A new person gets access. The reason someone is on the list changes, example, their role evolves, or someone ceases to have access, example, their project role ends, or they leave the company. Each update creates a new, versioned, time-stamped list section, and you must keep all the old versions. It builds that history.
That constant updating sounds like it could be a huge admin task without the right systems. Makes that software point even stronger. And what about people acknowledging their duties? Is that just a tick box?
Definitely not just a tick box. This is acknowledgement, and it's crucial but sometimes overlooked. Article 18, paragraph 2 says the issuer must take all reasonable steps to ensure everyone on the list acknowledges in writing their legal duties and the sanctions for insider dealing or unlawful disclosure. This needs an active, auditable process. Maybe it's a click-through confirmation in a system, a signed PDF back, or even a clear email confirmation. The key is keeping a record of these acknowledgments. It shows you fulfilled your duty to inform them and pins down their personal responsibility. Without it, your defense if something goes wrong is much weaker. And finally, retention. The list, all its historical versions, and the acknowledgments all kept for at least 5 years from when the list section was created or last updated, whichever is later. This ensures you have that full audit trail if needed years down the line.
Okay, so these meticulously kept lists are maintained internally. Do companies just send them to the CSSF regularly, or is it more on demand? Seems like a lot of data flying around otherwise.
You're right, it would be overwhelming. No, insider lists are not proactively filed. They are internal records, proof of your internal controls. However, and this is the key part, the issuer must be ready to provide the list to the CSSF as soon as possible upon its request. The Luxembourg Market Abuse Law gives the CSSF clear powers to demand this information during supervision or investigations. So you don't send it unless asked, but when they ask, you need to be able to produce it quickly and perfectly, often under tight deadlines, sometimes just hours. Any delay or error then can lead to penalties itself. This is why having robust, easily searchable digital systems is so important.
Got it. Ready at a moment's notice. A real test of your systems. Okay, we've covered the legal and practical foundations. Let's elevate things now to the strategic level. How do company secretaries handle the really complex stuff, like after a big merger? This is where the job gets truly strategic. Hashtag the strategic dimension navigating complex scenarios.
Exactly. Having grasped the mechanics, let's look at the strategic picture, particularly in situations like post-merger integration, especially if you're dealing with multiple stock exchange listings. Managing insider lists really moves beyond compliance. It becomes a core part of corporate strategy and risk management. This is where the company secretary adds huge value.
This is where they become that strategic partner. Let's talk about the post-merger crucible first. That sounds intense, like a real pressure cooker moment.
It really is. When a major acquisition closes, that's probably peak risk time for information control. Suddenly, you have a massive increase in people who have access to a flood of new, highly sensitive inside information. Think about it. Synergy targets, detailed restructuring plans, potential business disposals, big personnel changes, IT system integrations, revised financial forecasts. The sheer amount and sensitivity are huge, and it's often spread across newly combined teams from different corporate cultures, maybe using different systems. The big challenge is identifying everyone who could be an insider across these two previously separate organizations. Information silos from the old structures can easily become leak points. It's hard to manage.
So how do the best companies, the ones thinking strategically, manage that information explosion to keep control and stop those leaks?
The best practice we see is setting up a central integration insider list immediately after closing. This isn't just tacking onto the deal list. It's a new structure. This master integration list needs to be broken down quite granularly into distinct subsections for each key integration workstream. So you might have one for synergy realization finance, another for workforce integration HR, one for IT platform consolidation, maybe sales and marketing integration. This granular approach is vital. It helps enforce strict need-to-know access, minimizing the number of people exposed to any one piece of information. And importantly, it creates a very clear, defensible audit trail for regulators, showing you had a structured approach to managing this highly sensitive post-merger information flow, which can otherwise be chaotic.
That sounds like a really smart way to manage potential chaos, like building a secure building with many controlled access rooms, not just one big open space. Now, these deals always involve a whole army of external advisors. How does the strategic company secretary handle their insider list duties when you've got so many third parties involved?
Yes. The art of engaging external advisors. A big M&A deal brings in an ecosystem. Law firms, banks, accountants, PR firms, their people all become insiders. Now, as we said, these advisors have their own legal duty under M&R to maintain their own lists for their own staff. And it's big, but the ultimate responsibility still lies with the issuer. If an advisor messes up and leaks info, the company is still going to face the regulatory music. So you have to manage this proactively through contracts. The engagement letter for every single external advisor needs specific, non-negotiable clauses. These should require them to. 1, maintain their own MAR-compliant insider list for their team to the same standard as the issuer. 2, name a single senior contact person who will be put on the issuer's insider list. This is an ESMA recommendation, actually. It stops the issuer needing to chase down details for dozens of junior associates at multiple firms. You just track the main contact at each firm. 3, provide written confirmation, maybe annually or per project, that they've formally told their team members they are insiders about their duties and about the sanctions. And 4, commit to cooperating fully and quickly if the CSSF or another regulator asks for information. This contractual approach is your shield.
Right, it really hammers home that ultimate responsibility point. You delegate the task, maybe, but never the accountability. Let's touch on costs, pricing, timelines. This all sounds like a major undertaking and probably not cheap.
It is, and the costs are often underestimated. It's not just about paying the salaries of the compliance team managing the lists. The bigger costs are often hidden. The diversion of senior management time, the resources tied up in manual processes, and crucially, the risk of mistakes that comes with using spreadsheets for something this critical. A clunky, manual insider list system isn't just inefficient, it's a serious source of legal and reputational risk. Imagine trying to pull together 5 years of perfectly versioned, time-stamped lists for an urgent CSSF request from scattered spreadsheets. The potential for error is huge. This really forces a strategic build versus buy decision about technology. Investing in dedicated insider list management software isn't just an expense, it's an investment in risk mitigation and efficiency. These tools automate workflows, handle digital acknowledgments, provide secure storage, and crucially, give you automatic versioning with those immutable, compliant UTC timestamps. They create that defensible audit trail that's almost impossible to guarantee manually. The upfront cost often looks small compared to the potential fines and reputational hit from just one mistake or breach.
So tech isn't just nice to have, it's becoming a compliance necessity. Could you walk us through a typical M&A timeline example just to see how these lists evolve dynamically?
Sure, let's map it out to see how it works in practice. Okay, day one. A confidential approach is made or received. Right then, inside information exists. An event-based list section, let's call it Project Helios, is created immediately. Initially, maybe only a tiny core team is on it, CEO, CFO, CLO, chair perhaps. Small list, huge potential impact. Weeks 2 to 8. This is usually the heavy due diligence phase. The list grows rapidly. Internal teams are formed, external advisors, legal, finance, etc. are brought in over the wall. Every new person added, every change in their role in the project triggers an immediate update to the Project Helios list, creating a new version. Lots of updates happening here, maybe several times a week. Week 9, the deal is signed. A public announcement is carefully drafted and released through the proper channels. The moment it hits the wires, the information is public, so it stops being inside information. Week 9 plus 1 day. After the announcement, the company formally notifies the CSSF that disclosure was delayed, explaining how the 3 conditions under Article 17.4 were met. This notification must now go through the CSSF's electronic eRIAS portal. Post-closing, the Project Helios list section is formally closed, but it's not over. New inside information related to the integration now exists: synergy targets, restructuring details, etc. So, a new event-based list section, say post-merger integration, needs to be created immediately. Meanwhile, the original Project Helios list and all its versions get securely archived for that mandatory 5-year period. It's a continuous cycle.
That timeline really shows the dynamic part of the dynamic risk management. Constant creation, updating, closing, archiving. Now, what about companies listed in multiple places, say Luxembourg and Paris, plus maybe registered with the SEC in the US? That sounds like a real compliance maze.
It absolutely creates a complex multi-jurisdictional matrix.
Right.
It requires a really sophisticated, integrated approach. Now, the core MAR duty to keep the list is the same across the EU, so it applies equally to your Luxembourg and Paris listings. But the mechanics of public disclosure, the thing that often closes out a list section, can differ slightly between exchanges. Regulated info needs to go via an officially appointed mechanism, OAM. Luxi uses its first portal. Euronext has Euronext Direct. You have to make sure any announcement goes out correctly and crucially simultaneously on both platforms to keep things fair for all investors.
Okay, same core list rule, different disclosure plumbing. What does the US SEC registration add to the mix? Sounds like another layer.
Adding the SEC brings U.S. regulation FD fair disclosure into play. It's important to see the difference here. MAR is mainly about stopping insiders from using inside info to trade unfairly. Regulation FD is more about preventing companies from selectively disclosing important non-public information to just a few analysts or big investors, giving them an edge. They focus on different things, but they're deeply connected. If you had a leak of inside information in Europe breaching MAR's confidentiality requirement, that would almost certainly be a selective disclosure issue under Regulation FD in the US. It would likely trigger an immediate need for public disclosure over there, too. So a problem in one place quickly becomes a global problem.
Wow, that's a tight link. A slip-up in Europe triggers alarms in the US. How does a strategic company secretary juggle all of this without dropping the ball? Sounds like playing 3D chess.
The best approach isn't to manage these things in silos. That's asking for trouble. A truly strategic company secretary architects a single, unified, global disclosure and information control policy. This policy sets out one robust internal process. It covers identifying potentially sensitive info, assessing if it's material under both the EU Reasonable Investor Test and the US Total Mix standard, and then channels it through a coordinated protocol to satisfy everyone simultaneously: CSSF, AMF in France, Luxi, Euronext, and the SEC. And the meticulously managed MAR insider list. That's the absolute foundation of the information control part of that global policy. It demonstrates a holistic view that turns a potential compliance nightmare into a managed strength. It's about building one integrated system.
That's impressive coordination. It really underlines that theme of anticipating and adapting. Okay, let's look ahead now. What's on the regulatory horizon? What recent or upcoming changes should company secretaries be tracking right now, late August 2025, to stay ahead? Hashtag the regulatory horizon, recent and upcoming developments.
Well, as of now, late August 2025, the good news is that the regulatory direction for insider lists seems to be towards pragmatic evolution. This is largely thanks to the ongoing work around the EU Listing Act, which is trying to make EU markets more attractive by reducing admin burdens where possible without compromising integrity.
Okay, the Listing Act again. So what specific changes are coming down the track that will directly affect how these lists are managed day to day? Sounds like potential relief, maybe?
Yes, following consultations earlier this year, ESMA has proposed some significant simplifications to the technical standards for the lists themselves. These are widely expected to be adopted. There are two key changes that company secretaries will likely welcome. First, reduced data fields. This is a big one, directly addressing that GDPR tension we discussed. The plan is to remove the requirement to collect an insider's birth surname, their private phone numbers, and their full personal home address. Date of birth might only be needed if you can't get a national ID number. This should really streamline data collection, reduce friction, and align MAR better with GDPR data minimization without losing key regulatory info. Second, a reinforcement on permanent insiders. The new rules are expected to formally write down ESMA's existing strict guidance, basically saying that the permanent insider category is for an extremely small group and should be used very cautiously. This reinforces the idea that event-based lists are the default and best practice way. It makes regulatory oversight more precise by clearly linking specific people to specific information rather than having broad, potentially less accurate permanent assignments.
Those sound like genuinely helpful practical changes. Good to see regulators responding to real-world operational challenges. What about the specific Luxembourg environment? Anything particular companies need to be aware of regarding the CSSF locally?
Here in Luxembourg, the CSSF's focus remains very much on process integrity and strong internal controls. Remember, under that 2016 market abuse law, the CSSF has significant powers, including imposing hefty administrative fines for MAR breaches. While they don't always publicize specific fines for list mismanagement, their thematic reviews, like the 2022 review on store obligations for fund managers, show they look closely at internal processes, controls, and training. It suggests they care not just if you have a list, but how well you manage your internal information flow. A really critical practical point for anyone involved in MAR compliance in Luxembourg is the mandatory erase portal. Since May 2022, all MAR notifications to the CSSF, like notifying them after the fact that you delayed disclosure, must go through this electronic system, no more email or paper. Accessing erase requires a Lux Trust certificate, which is like an electronic ID. This can be a practical hurdle, especially for directors or advisors based outside Luxembourg. You need to plan ahead to make sure the right people have the necessary certificate and access, because filings often have very tight deadlines. It's a practical detail you need to sort out early.
That's a vital operational tip. Proactive planning, especially for international teams, is key. It's not just knowing the rules, but mastering the regulator's tools.
Exactly. And one final point. While Luxembourg rules and CSSF guidance are obviously key, a smart company secretary also keeps an eye on what peer regulators in other EU countries are saying or doing. Guidance from, say, the Dutch AFM on handling inside info, or reviews by the UK's FCA, even post-Brexit, their approach is influential, can offer useful insights into how the harmonized EU rules are being interpreted elsewhere. This wider view helps you anticipate future expectations and build that corporate fortress to be resilient from all angles.
That's great advice for staying truly ahead of the game. A sophisticated, broader perspective. Okay, we've covered the legal nuts and bolts, the practicalities, the strategic angles, and the future outlook. Let's wrap up by thinking about the real value proposition here. Beyond just avoiding trouble, hashtag the unique selling point from compliance to corporate fortress.
Yes, we've covered a lot of ground, legal, practical, strategic, but I think the ultimate point of mastering the insider list goes way beyond just ticking compliance boxes or avoiding fines. For the company secretary, getting this right is a huge opportunity to demonstrate profound value. You're moving beyond administration. You become a true guardian of the company's most sensitive, valuable, and volatile asset, its information.
Guardian of information. I like that. It really elevates the role. It sounds like you're building a serious defense system for the company.
It's a great analogy. Think of the insider list as the central control ledger inside that corporate fortress we talked about. It dictates exactly who gets the keys to which sensitive rooms, who has access. It tracks their movements meticulously, those crucial timestamps. And it ensures everyone with a key understands the rules, those written acknowledgments. It's a system of control and accountability. Now, if that fortress is breached, if information leaks, deliberately or accidentally, the whole structure is undermined. The company faces regulatory attacks, wild market speculation, share price volatility, and maybe worst of all, a serious loss of trust from shareholders and the public. The fines can hurt, but the reputation damage can last much longer. But a perfectly kept set of insider lists, updated diligently, archived properly, that's your ultimate audit trail. It's like the black box flight recorder. If there's ever a crisis or an investigation, it can prove you had robust controls, you acted diligently, you were accountable. It's your strongest defense.
So it's not just defensive against fines, it's proactively building and proving trustworthiness to everyone who matters. That's a powerful upside.
Exactly. Meticulous management builds trust across the board. With regulators like the CSSF, a clean record shows a strong compliance culture, leading to a more constructive relationship. They see you're serious about managing risk. For your own board and chief legal officer, knowing this critical risk is handled effectively provides huge confidence. It frees them up to focus on strategy, not constantly worrying about potential market abuse issues. And for the market itself, investors, analysts preventing leaks protects the integrity of deals and ensures a level playing field. That's the whole point of MAR, right? Maintaining that confidence underpins the company's long-term value and reputation. It's fundamental.
That's a really compelling summary. It definitely reframes the insider list, not a burden, but a strategic asset, a pillar of good governance, and essential for market integrity. Makes you realize that neglecting it isn't just a compliance slip-up, it's potentially damaging the core of the business. Hashtag tag a key takeaways recap. Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's quickly recap those 3 key takeaways. The essential things to keep front of mind. First, remember the insider list is way more than just a list. It's a strategic tool. Its quality directly reflects your company's governance, health, and control over its most sensitive information. It's a sign of your commitment to market integrity.
Second, process integrity is your strongest defense. Everything from GDPR-compliant data gathering to immediate timestamped updates to getting those formal acknowledgments, getting the process right is what ensures compliance and protects the company.
And third, the rules keep evolving. Stay proactive. Anticipate changes like those from the EU Listing Act. And make sure you've mastered the practical tools like the CSSF's eRICE portal. Stay informed. Stay agile. Treat regulation as a framework for building excellence. Excellent. Thank you for guiding us through that complex but absolutely critical topic. Hopefully this deep dive into the insider list has given you, our listener, valuable and practical insights to navigate more effectively and strategically. This podcast is a collaborative and free resource that improves continually, so your comments or requests for new topics are highly welcome, especially on YouTube. We want to be a helpful strength for everyone working in the Luxembourg Financial Center at all levels. We are often asked how you can help us. Well, a great way to help is by subscribing to our shows on all major podcast platforms, including Spotify, as well as an Apple Podcast, where a 5-star rating would really help us. You can also like our videos and subscribe to our Rigore Media YouTube channel. All relevant links will be available in the show notes. For our French-speaking listeners, you can also find our sister podcast in French.
It was the Luxembourg Fundcast for you today. This podcast includes content created using artificial intelligence tools. All information is for general purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, legal, or regulatory advice. Listeners should verify information independently and consult qualified professionals for personalized guidance.